Hey, welcome back to Bandwagon fans. This is Jeff, and we're going to be talking about the movie Ma tonight. And I am actually joined by a special guest. This is Renee Bibby.
My day job is. Yeah. Oh, you were just about to jump in. I'm like, hey,
it's me. I was about to lead you into that, Renee. If you could just kind of tell everybody kind of what you do and how you ended up here in this lovely set.
Yeah. So my day job is a graphic designer, but my side gig is a writer. So I like to go see films and dissect them from a writerly perspective.
Good. Well, we are gonna be talking about Ma. And this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. The movie's already been out for a week. If you were going to go see it, you've probably seen it by now.
Right.
But we're going to just kind of talk spoilers, and we're going to kind of use this movie as a jumping off point for some other issues, probably mainly focused on the script, actually. So it's good that you have that background.
Right.
So Ma, this is a horror movie. Or a thriller.
Horror, yeah.
Starring Octavia Spencer, actually also produced by Octavia Spencer.
Right.
She plays the title character of Ma. It also has Juliette Lewis in it and a whole bunch of teen actors, and I'm not going to look them up. So the basic premise of Ma is these kids need somebody to buy them alcohol. They recruit Ma, Octavia Spencer, to do it, which then leads her into getting them all to drink at her house as a safe place.
Turns out there's a personal connection. There's some history there that ends up playing out.
The kids don't know about the history.
Right.
But the mother went to high school with a few of their parents, holds a grudge, to say the least. And then goes all crazy stalker on them.
Gets sweet revenge, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, no,
she tries to. She tries to. She doesn't actually get sweet revenge.
She doesn't.
I'm gonna grab my drink here though, and feel free to. Oh, you got yours there. All right. So So that's the basic gist of the movie, and I'm gonna kick it over to you. The same question you asked me coming out of the theater. Overall impression, quick snap, coming out of the movie, what'd you think of it?
I had the same opinion as you. It was really boring.
Really?
They spent way too long trying to set up a premise for the film, a premise for her to be doing what she was doing. And and there was a brief moment at the beginning where I thought, oh, this is going to be a little bit more interesting. There's going to be character and personalities, but then there was too much of that, too much time spent on that. But even time was spent on that wasn't coherent.
Right.
Like, it didn't make sense. I wasn't able to connect that the main protagonist, that her mother, I couldn't figure out which younger version she was, right? Like, because they had those flashbacks into the past,
yeah,
and I couldn't figure out which her, like, could you figure out what her mother was?
Yeah, so, and I should have the IMDb page pulled up so we could at least see
like
who we're talking
all the
about.
Characters, yeah.
So Juliette Lewis played the mother of the main daughter of the movie, and in the flashbacks that I was actually able to follow, because in the flashbacks she had the early late '80s style braids.
Okay.
A couple braids.
Because they mentioned the other really bad one, Mercedes. Like, she was clearly referenced, but it wasn't clear whether or not she was fairly good friends, and that there was that extra layer of betrayal from what had happened in the past, because there was this semblance of friendship. But again, it's fuzzy. Like, it's not clear. It's a little hard to hold the emotional thread of what had happened in the past. And they were doing this really silly thing of, like, sort of seeding it early on. But then you're able to intuit what happened. You're like, she's going into a dark closet with this kid. It's not going to go well, And so it wasn't even a surprising twist at some point that she'd been traumatized in her past. It didn't. And then at the end of the day, that trauma was meant to inform the violence. But the violence became against the kids and not against the parents, and then it was it was just a hot mess. One parent, yeah. It was a hot mess, is really what it was.
Yeah. So in terms of the thumbs up, thumb down, did I like this movie or not? No. And it kind of goes to what you were just talking about. They spent. This wasn't. It didn't work as a thriller.
No.
And at no point was the movie scary.
No.
And it didn't work as a character piece.
Right.
Because the characters were dumb, and I had no interest in them.
Right.
The editing of the movie was really confusing. The flashback stuff didn't really confuse me. I just didn't care.
Right.
What did confuse me is you had characters. Ma started going crazy pretty early on, pulling a gun on somebody.
Yeah.
And these kids kept brushing it off. And even in one scene, they'd be like, "Oh, we're done with her," and then the very next scene, they're back at her house partying.
That made no sense.
And just know, so if you're gonna make a character piece, the characters have to make some sort of sense.
Right. And
when they stopped making sense, I stopped caring. And then as we were coming out of theater, you brought up something that. All right, so in terms of the movie just sucked.
Yeah.
And doesn't warrant any discussion whatsoever.
Not really, no.
But that's not what we're here for. Any movie you can use as a jumping off point to talk about art in general. So that's what we're gonna try to make something out of this dumpster fire of a movie. So
right.
There were two kind of interesting things. One you were talking about as we were leaving, and that is the amount of effort they put into rehabilitating the character of Ma and justifying her actions.
Right.
And if you can just kind of elaborate on what you were thinking throughout that process.
So they tried to absolve her of her craziness. They tried to do this thing where they said her violence is rooted in trauma. And that's an interesting story that particularly for women that vengeance it's rooted in something that was problematic and in their childhood, in peer groups. But then they did this thing where they undercut that by also having the daughter, and that she was clearly enacting this this Munchausen by proxy situation with her own daughter. So then we're meant to feel to some extent like she's like Carrie, that like she's been traumatized by her own past, traumatized by the people at her high school. And that maybe could have carried it, but then she is, but then that trauma and violence becomes less interesting. You can't root for her because she's also trying to enact violence on the kids, and so it's like paying for the sins of your fathers kind of idea. And so it just got really messy. And then that trying to justify I didn't need justification, I guess, what it comes down to. I wanted the horror to be a little more pure. I wanted it to be purely that she was not well, had whatever sort of thing, Norman Batesy illusion, maybe a hint of something from the past, that you're like, oh, she's really not. But I didn't need the whole backstory. The backstory undercuts the how I can root for her to kill people.
You're looking more for Michael Myers. Just
right, yeah,
you don't really want it. You don't want to know how the sausage was made. You just want to enjoy the meal.
Right.
Yeah.
Or make it a film about trauma of your peers. Make it a film about, and then have that be a separate thing. But the mishmash of that, trying to make it about both the trauma of being a young person who's an outcast in your friend group, but then also being about that revenge Carrie's the perfect answer to that already, right? She's the perfect vengeance from Friends. I think that's a much better version of that film.
Yeah. Now, as we were watching the movie, what was going through my head, one thing that I find interesting coming out of probably the last few years is the gender swapping, race swapping, age swapping. Now, this is the second movie of 2019 where the antagonist is an older woman.
Right.
But it's still written the same way that traditional white male roles are. So as we were watching this movie, I was imagining the Ma just being a white male, and a lot of the same tropes were being used to justify her behaviors, particularly because they set her up to be the stalker. So I was thinking, if this had been a white male, how would it be viewed? And it would be, and too often in Hollywood, people try to excuse abhorrent behavior by saying, well, if somebody had just loved him more as a kid, then he wouldn't have turned out like this.
Right.
And the word you use is absolved.
Right.
Yeah, and they try too hard to absolve the person's behavior. It's like, no, it's just abhorrent behavior, and there is no excuse for it. And
as a consumer, in film, I'm not looking for an excuse. I am perfectly fine for it to be, and not that it's my jam. I'm less interested in slasher horror than I am in paranormal horror or thrillers. I don't need, sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier. The violence for violence sake is still that there's something pure in that, and that is I'm willing to consume that when it's just pure violence, when it's pure serial killer. Like I don't need the explanation for Hannibal. Hannibal exists, and let's just like sort of revel in that. Because the more complicated you make the backstory, the more complicated the whole bulk of the movie becomes, and it's too much.
Yeah, and it you know, I was actually just watching a video from Phil Mento earlier today where he was criticizing a couple horror movies. One was oh crap, I'm forgetting the names of them. But he was criticizing a couple of horror movies for revealing the monster too early.
Yes.
And it's like the unknown is always scarier than unknown.
100%. Yes.
The amount of time they spent setting up Ma, like we don't want to know that much about her.
I just want her to be creepy.
And the more we knew about her, the less scary she was, and the less interesting the whole film was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Then she became human, and then she became, you know, like. But then there's also, again, the thing with the daughter was so weird. That was
yeah. So that's a huge plot point that we kind of glossed over.
Yeah.
So early on in the movie, Maggie, Juliette Lewis's daughter Maggie, played by Diana Silvers,
who looks like a young Julia Roberts too.
Yeah, that was good casting.
That was
But, so she's brand new to this school, and one of the first people she meets is, we find out later, Ma's daughter.
Right.
She meets her. She helps the girl. Jeannie
in a wheelchair.
Is in a wheelchair, and Maggie helps Jeannie get the wheelchair going. Mm-hmm. And then we find out later that this girl Jeannie is actually Ma's daughter, and is basically Ma is using drugs to kind of keep her sick or keep her.
Right.
Anyway, that was a whole messy little subplot thing.
What was that? Yeah.
But it just there was so much money we spent into rehabilitating Ma's character, but she was such a despicable person, regardless of whatever trauma she had. So
I did not need a backstory on that.
It didn't need it, didn't want it, and it really, really hampered the movie.
Yeah, I mean, like if we look at John Wick, for example.
And I was just about to get to that. So speaking of John Wick, this is the text you sent me when I told you that I just saw John Wick. We jumped into that earlier.
I said it was so good.
Yes. I can't find it. But yeah, you really like John Wick. And I saw it a couple nights ago, and it was really good. It was as good as advertised.
Yes.
But the violence in that movie was over the top, and from the first second to the very end.
Yes.
Whereas Ma, I actually thought there'd be more violence in it.
I agree.
There was actually very little, but when it was in the vein of Saw or the later Saw movies or Hostel. It was
right.
How creative can we be in showing somebody being in pain?
Yeah.
Inflicting pain on somebody.
Yeah. It becomes about the torture of it. And again, as I was thinking about like what interests me, I'm not interested in torture as a consumer. I'm interested in death. I'm interested in killing, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's what I don't want anyone to hurt. And I like that John Wick kills people quick. I mean, or not quick, because there's also a book where he uses very effectively to kill someone, but
so I think so in comparing John Wick, there's a kind of cartoonish aspect to those kind of movies. There's also just an artistry to it.
Oh, it's stunning.
When you're watching a movie like John Wick or any kind of Beijing kung fu movie.
Mm-hmm. Atomic Blonde was another I thought.
I missed that one, but I'm a huge Jet Li fan, and watching all of Jet Li's early movies. There's an artistry to how the body can move and how to utilize your environment to as a weapon
to destroy people.
Yeah. Whether it so those kind of action scenes can be appreciated. You can avoid yourself of the consequences of the violence and just appreciate the artistry of the fight.
100%. And also those types of films tend to be shot in a way that is meant to look at that, right? Mm-hmm. They're like John Wick. I loved because they have really open angles. You could see the actual fighting. You could track the action really well. You could tell that most of it was Keanu Reeves doing it. And so it really is a marvel of the human form and the human experience. Like that, and that's really like I really enjoy that. I like being able to see a well filmed shot fight scene. Like
John Wick, even though it's centered around violence and killing people in creative ways, it does celebrate. It's a celebration of the human body and
Yes.
how and what it's capable of.
And,
Whereas Ma is just, how can we creatively inflict pain on somebody? Let's sew this girl's mouth shut.
Which isn't even that unique, that wasn't even that mind bending. Yeah. I mean, in that sense, even that part it didn't push far enough. So they had dog collars on. Like none of that. If it was gonna do that sort of torture, the torture sort of porn part of it, like if it was gonna push the torture. That was pansy. Like it wasn't enough. It wasn't, and I don't particularly like that as a consumer. That's not my jam. But
right.
I was kind of like, come on, you just half-assed that.
Yeah. Almost everything in this movie was half-assed.
I mean, so much of it.
So,
the other thing too, like I had this debate with my coworkers because, like, I was like, John Wick is awesome, and they're just like. And I had a coworker who was like, no, it's boring. I don't like, and I agree that, like, for me, it really is about the performance of the fighting. Like when he was fighting those two men at the same time, and there was like just really, really well done. And I think the thing that for me in a movie like that, which is really great about this action films, is that the victims are, particularly in John Wick, I think, they do a really good job of setting up the narrative so that the people he's killing are not innocent. He's killing assassins. He's killing other people who are trying to come after him. And so their death feels more justified. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, these are people who are actively, knowingly engaging in a violent face-off with him, and the consequences they might die. And so I like I like that he triumphs. I like that, but I also like that the people he's killing are, like, there was that whole scene when they come to the hotel and you can't see anyone's faces. Like they're literally wearing like helmet, like you can't see anything. Yeah. And so they just becomes, and I think there's an argument to be made that dehumanizes violence, but I do not subscribe in any way to the premise that violence, like watching violence equates to violence, that
right.
because you watch it, you're going to become violent. So.
Right. As evidenced by you. You're not out there beating the crap out of people.
No,
or killing people.
I do feel it though. And I think that's the thing, is that rage and like that wanting to like punch someone in the face, like that is a legit feeling. And I think for us to ignore and pretend that that's not part of a human experience is really naive.
It was. So I was running late to get to the theater, and I got stuck behind the absolute slowest people in every single red light between the Tucson Mall and the movie theater. And believe me, if I had a weapon on me, somebody would have got shot.
I mean, it's just...
I was getting so frustrated just trying to get Yeah, so yeah, that is part of the human experience.
Have you seen that? There's this meme where it's a 2-panel comic, and in the first one, there's a person very smiling and saying, everything is great. And then the next person, in the next panel, someone is in front of them moving slowly, and it says, I will destroy you and everything you love. Like, it's like, that's how quickly we jump to that. And so when you have a movie like John Wick, I feel like that's what it's celebrating. It's celebrating that, like, and then also, they kill the dog, which, in the world of writing is supposed to be like a trope that you're not supposed to kill the dog because dogs are like the purest innocence. I mean, you can kill a cat, but killing a dog is one thing. And I say that because I have cats. But so they killed the dog, right? And so then John Wick is seeking vengeance for the dog, and that becomes an honorable cause. Having a reason to fight and to punish other people is seeded early on in that whole series, and it works really well for the violence. Like, that's why I think people love John Wick. So I didn't actually see the first two John Wick movies. John Wick 3 was my first one. Get out.
And I don't know how similar the other two movies are, but as I was watching it, I was thinking this is the best video game movie ever made. I mean, it was
hands down.
The narrative, I could care less about the narrative.
You don't need it. You don't need it.
This was really cool settings with a bunch of nameless, faceless goons, a few boss battles, and some really uninteresting cutscenes that I just wish had been shorter. Right. But if this had actually been based off of a video game, it would have been the best video game movie ever made. Yes. It was just a ton of fun, but it's an interesting dichotomy of why violence in one context doesn't bother me, but violence, and I would say violence in all, but the what was promised in the trailer was basically everything you see in the trailer is in the movie. Right. Whereas movies like Hostel or Saw, they add a lot. It gets more gruesome. Bad Samaritan. Yeah. There was a drive to ratchet up the torture and the pain,
right.
and I just have zero interest in those movies. They just
it's not. I'm not interested in suffering.
Oh, there's actually a point in this movie, Ma, that is a perfect metaphor for how this movie was. She was getting ready to neuter the father of one of the boys.
Yeah.
And then wussed out on it.
Yeah.
And I was squirming. I was getting ready to turn.
Was it?
Because I don't want to see. And she literally, like, it actually showed his penis, and she had it in his hand, knife to the base of his dick, and she said, "Now I'm not going to do that." And I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad because I don't want to see that.
I mean, but then you but then do it.
Yeah.
Like, don't promise this and then not deliver.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I wouldn't have wanted to see it, but narratively, purely from a story perspective, that was a bad. Yeah. That was a bad choice.
Yeah, and then instead she just infused him with dog blood.
But then still slit his wrist. So well, I don't know. There's that. The way she killed him, it made no sense. I don't know.
Nothing in this movie made sense. One moment to the next, one scene to the next. Things just did not make sense.
And what's a huge shame about that is this idea, right, of black actors being in films that are not about the blackness, right, where it's just like I am I'm in the film. Like, I wanted a horror film where the protagonist was female, where the protagonist was black, and that it was so well constructed that part became irrelevant. That it was just about how great that, but it didn't deliver on that. It didn't deliver on any parts of it, right? So I was excited. I was very excited for it to be a film that brought that, and it didn't.
So this could have easily been any white actress, and it would not have changed the movie one iota. On the one hand, that's kind of refreshing too.
Right, exactly. Yes, so, I agree with that. Yeah.
Every movie doesn't have to be Get Out. Every movie doesn't have to be Us. Right. It is kind of refreshing just to see people, whether it's an older woman or a black person or women in general. It is kind of refreshing to see them cast just as normal.
Exactly, and that's why you want it to be a good film,
right?
For that reason, right? That you're kind of like, anyone can be anyone who happens to be black can be in this film, and I guess maybe that's part of it too. Is also they can be in crappy films too.
Yes,
right? We should allow women to be in crappy films.
I don't know how many Tyler Perry movies you've seen, but it is well established that. Yeah.
She even says that. She's like, I'm not Medea or something, right?
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, she said something. She's like, or something about that, and I was like, well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Medea would have cut off the dick. Medea would not have hesitated.
That's the new shirts for this show.
Yeah, Medea would have cut it off. Oh yeah, Medea would have cut it off. That should be a shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the so as a discussion about a movie, Ma sucked. Don't waste your time with it.
Do not skip.
But any piece of art can engender a larger discussion. Some lend to discussion more so than others, but I think we did our best.
Yep, that's right.
So thanks for watching. I'm Jeff.
I'm Renee.
And get on the bandwagon.